Good morning and welcome to a video presentation from the ACT Junior Chess League. This is part of a series of short YouTube videos which will help you develop your chess skills, especially in preparation for playing in junior and inter-school events here in Canberra ACT. My name is Sean Press. I'm a FIDE trainer and FIDE master, and I organise these events on behalf of the ACT Junior Chess League. The course we're looking at today is about simple tactics, forks and skewers, and is the second episode of what I would regard as our B-level courses. A-level courses being complete introduction to people who are completely new to chess. B-level courses for people who basically know the moves and know the basics about checks and captures, but need to know a little bit more in terms of improving your chess. So let's get started, and we're starting with our first example of a fork. And a fork is basically when you attack two pieces at once. And if the attacking piece is less valuable than the pieces under attack, then there is an opportunity to gain material on the next move. And here's a very well-known example and very popular with junior players. So we start off by developing our pieces, which is always a good advice. Bishop here, knight f6, which is the two knights defense. Some people play this because they know this opening. Other people play it just because they think bringing out knights is good. But after knight g5, white is threatening to take on f7. And it's supported by the bishop. So if you're familiar with the four-move checkmate, you'll certainly know a similar idea where the queen comes out. But in this case, it's a knight taking on f7. Now, I'm going to deliberately choose a bad move here with h6. That's why I've given it 2 question marks to indicate that it's a poor move. But it lets us see what white can do. So white will take on f7, and the king can't capture because it's protected by the bishop. Now, the important thing about forks and a lot of chess tactics is in chess, you're only allowed to play one move at a time. So in this case, when the knight goes to f7, black can either move the queen to safety, move the rook to safety, but whichever one moves, the remaining piece will get captured. This is why forks are so powerful. So we better move the queen because it's more valuable than the rook. But after knight takes here on h8, you've captured a rook for free and a pawn on f7 as well. So that's the basic idea with a knight fork. And the reason why knight forks are very common in chess is normally the knight will attack pieces that can't move like knights. There's no point, well, there is no point, but if you forked to a knight and another piece, well, then your knight could get captured by the other knight. But the unique way that knights move in that L shape, okay, does in fact make them very powerful. If one of the pieces under attack is your king, then you often don't have a choice about which piece you move. You've got to save the king. So again, let's have a look here. Bishop f4, knight here, knight to c3, Jababa London these days, but for historical accuracy, this was actually earlier played by one of ACT juniors in the 1980s, a guy by the name of Gary Wilson, who used to play this quite a lot. Pawn to e6, and knight to b5. And like in the other example, where we're attacking f7, in this case, we're attacking on c7. And again, I'm deliberately choosing a bad move here, just to show what's going to happen next. Nonetheless, the reason why bad moves like this get played, and I do see them get played at junior chess events, is because black did not ask themselves the very basic question which you should ask yourself all the time, which is, why did my opponent move their piece to that square? And so we play knight takes c7 here, and we're attacking the king, and we're attacking the rook. And in this case, the king has to move. I will point out, you could always take the knight, but then the bishop will simply take the queen, which is not what you really want in this position like this. So the king goes to f8, and then we just pick up the rook in the corner here. Moving on. It isn't just knights that can fork pieces, although knights are the obvious one. Queens are particularly good at this because queens will move in 2 different directions. They can't change while they move, but they can threaten things in separate ways. Knight to f6. Bishop comes out early to attack the knight. c6 at first doesn't look like it makes too much sense, but in fact, black is setting some sort of sneaky trap that if white isn't paying attention to or plays the wrong move, such as e3 here with a double question mark, queen check, and suddenly the king is under attack, and the bishop on g5 is under attack as well. And we can't retreat the bishop to d2, so c3, and we take. You could always try d2, but that doesn't help because we're still going to just take on g5 like this. However, there are better moves, and we'll rewind it slightly. Knight f3 is simple, because after queen check here, the bishop's actually protected by the knight on f3, and so white is free just to either block or block this way. Both of those are okay. A3 is just an example of a waiting move, even though it's not the best move in the position, because you can play queen check here, and the bishop certainly is under attack as well as the king, but white can get out of this fork by retreating the bishop back to d2, moves it to a safe square and attacks the queen at the same time, as well as blocking the check. Or you can even avoid the check with queen d2, because if you're paying attention, the bishop here is protected by the queen here. So if the queen took the bishop, you would just lose your queen to queen takes queen. Right, moving on to our next chapter. Pawn forks are very strong because simply pawns are worth less than all the other pieces. So when you attack two pieces at once with a pawn, there's certainly a very good chance of capturing one of those pieces in a way that's favorable to you. So let's have a look here. We'll play the king's gambit in this case, and the bishop moves out. So let's develop a few pieces right here. And we take the pawn now. And there are a few reasonably good moves here, but not this one. And that's why I'm giving it 2 question marks. Because black only thought about, oh, well, I'll just take the pawn. And then missed this move here, where the pawn is now attacking 2 pieces. So off we go. We move the bishop, and we lose the knight to the pawn. Or coming back here, we could always retreat the knight, but then we lose the bishop to the pawn. And white has either won a bishop or a knight in return for a pawn. Note in all these cases, our goal is to win more material, because in chess, you need pieces to attack your opponent's king, and you need pieces to defend your own king. And if you have more pieces attacking than defending, it's easier to checkmate. So eliminating your opponent's pieces while keeping yours on the board is a really good way of improving your chances of checkmating. However, not all forks are good forks. Sometimes your opponent is to move one of their pieces out of danger, while at the same time causing problems for one of your own pieces. And here's a good example. Knight c7 looks like a great move. We're attacking the rook in the corner, and we're attacking the queen on e6. But white didn't ask themselves, well, black gets a move before I get my next move, and what are they going to do with that move? And queen c4 is a counter fork. Okay, but after the queen moves to c4, it's white has problems because the king is under attack and the knight on c7 is under attack. And if we block like this, the queen will just take. And instead of winning a rook, white has managed to lose their knight. So not a good outcome there. Next fork. A fork is often used as part of a series of moves. In this position, material is equal, but white sees a chance to create a fork, starting with a capture. Checks and captures, as we say, because we take here. And this is a capture. And at first, black thinks they're okay because they will retake. Rook takes, but then the bishop moves to e6 and attacks the king and the rook at the same time. And this was what white was planning when they took here, because this was the follow-up that was expected. King moves and bishop takes, and we're now ahead a piece. Now in this position, by the way, it's just worth noting that white isn't going to win the game by checkmating with their extra pieces, because pretty much it's incredibly difficult to checkmate with just a bishop, even when aided by the king. But what white will do in this position is start marching the king up the board, and the goal is to capture as many black pawns as possible, with the long-term plan of then moving the white pawns up the board to make a queen. And this is a lot easier to do when you've got an extra piece. Let's come back here. If you just played bishop check first, hoping that black would move the king and then you will take the bishop, of course the bishop just takes the bishop. So forking pieces that move the same as your piece isn't always the right strategy. And of course, some people might say, well, why would I take the rook if I'm going to lose a piece? like this. So instead I'm going to check, but this doesn't help because simply just the king moves. And white is still a piece ahead because they've captured the bishop on d5. Moving on, now we have, after we've done with forks, a skewer is another tactic in chess, and this is the second one we're going to look at today. It's where you attack a strong piece, forcing it to move, and then you simply take the piece behind it. And in this very simple position, we just play rook h7 check. And the most obvious skewers are the ones where you attack the king, putting it in check and forcing it to move. King moves, and we've just won a rook. And hopefully you know how to checkmate with king and rook versus king. If you don't, there's other videos in this series that will teach you that as well. Moving forward, for a skewer to work, you normally need two things. The pieces need to be in a straight line, and the pieces at the back either aren't protected or are weaker than the attacking piece. So we play e4, e5, f4, and we take. Okay, and then we're going to play king f2 here. Terrible move, okay, but one which will show us how this is going to work. So we play queen check, like this, attacking the king. And then this is an even worse move, but again, it's going to demonstrate what's happening. And then we just check here. And notice that the king and the queen are lined up on that diagonal, and the queen now goes through. Now, if the king moves, free queen, which is what we're aiming for here. But again, if you're getting better at chess, you won't just give up after one move like this. You might ask yourself, I can put the pawn in the road, blocking the check, and the skewer goes away. But good old en passant saves the day here for black, because black can take that pawn en passant, and then after the king moves out of check, we still get the free queen at the end. You're unlikely to get that kind of skewer in a real game of chess, but it does demonstrate how they work. Okay. All long-range pieces, queens, bishops, and rooks, can create a skewer. And in this position, the black queen and the rook are on the same line, so white takes advantage of this. And they play this move here, and they're attacking the queen, but note behind it is the rook. Okay, and this gives black a difficult choice. If we retreat, you get checkmated straight up. So not only do you win the rook, but you also end up checkmating black with a back rank checkmate. Black's other choices to deal with this are essentially, one, we could just take the rook, okay? And often as people get better, they don't see the skewer until it's too late, but at least they will work out what to do next. And that is, in this case, try and give up the queen for as much material as possible. We play rook here, and then we can play rook takes and knight takes. And white is still a piece ahead, which should be enough to win, but I think in a practical sense, especially if you're playing inter-school chess, white still has to know what to do in this position. So if you're black, you might have better drawing chances. Certainly better drawing chances than just getting checkmated. We can play knight takes d1 back here, by the way, queen takes d1. And you just take, instead of with the rook, you take with the knight, because black won't take the rook, take the knight with the rook, because they'll lose their rook, and white will be a complete rook ahead, so we don't want that to happen. And the other option is to retreat the queen here in the hope that next move you can move the queen, for example, to c8. But white will still take, and then we take here. And then we play rook here, and this is enough to win because we're not skewering anything behind the rook in this case. Okay. But if the rook does try and move out of the way so it doesn't get swapped off, you are walking into a checkmate. So we're kind of skewering the checkmating square in this case. Next example. Bishops are particularly good at playing for skewers as they are less valuable than just about all the pieces they attack. And specifically, here's a really good example. We just play bishop here. Okay. And we're attacking the queen and the rook is behind it. So what do? We move and we take. And then we take, and we've gained 5 points, which is capturing the rook, for 3 points, which is the bishop. However, again in chess, don't take everything for granted. Black could play this move, thinking that if you take my queen, I will take your queen, and other things will happen. So we take the queen, okay? And then we take the queen. Oops, we still take the rook, okay? And then we take here, and then we take back. And this is even worse because you've managed to give away the knight on g3 as well. Previously, before, it was just bishop took the rook, rook took the bishop, 5 against 3. Now it's bishop takes the rook, rook takes the bishop, and I get to take the knight as well. So I'm 5 points in front. But let's just come back here. If we take here, which looks okay, the queen can take. But ever alert chess players will keep looking at checks and captures until they see some excellent moves. And funnily enough, in this position, we can get knight to f6 because this pawn on g7 can't capture on f6 because the queen has pinned it. And if you move the pawn out of the way diagonally, you would put yourself in check. And then we're going to take the rook at the bottom of the board anyway. And guess what? We've still won the exchange. Next one, and I think this is the second last one we're looking at today. Once you begin to spot forks and skewers, you can actually glue them together in a really clever way. So the black king and black queen are on the diagonal, and if the bishop was able to check the king from behind, it could capture the queen when the king moves out of the way. But when we take here, and I'm giving this an exclamation mark, which means a good move, it looks like, okay, yeah, sure, if the king moves out of the way, I'm going to take the queen. But there is nothing guarding the bishop. So black takes. And it's suddenly, this is not so great. But then white has this excellent follow-up, which is now a fork. We are attacking the king and the queen at the same time. And this was white's plan all along. Take on f7, fork on e5. Okay, king moves, we take here, and white should win the game by, as we've said before, bringing one of the pawns up to the end of the board and making a queen. And lucky last. Here we go. Sometimes the skewer only targets a piece of equal or lesser value, but as long as that piece is unprotected, you can win material. And here comes a long game to finish this up. So we'll just bring out some pieces. And we're just moving. Knight goes here, bishop goes here, knight goes here. And the queen takes here. And this turns out to be a bit of a mistake, okay? Because the queen is now in front of a weaker piece behind it, okay? And this is our recipe for a skewer. Stronger piece in front, weaker piece behind. And we play bishop here. And we have a look here. We've got this idea with the bishop moving down the diagonal, attacking the queen and attacking the bishop, because if the queen moves, okay, we just take the bishop because it's unprotected, okay, and we've got an extra piece. Black can try and wriggle a little bit. We could play pawn up, but then we just take because this is guarded by the knight, and so you're actually just wasting a pawn. And you're still losing the bishop, but you've given away a pawn as well. The other option is a slightly interesting and riskier option, but it doesn't quite work. And it's queen takes the bishop. Because the argument is, if I'm going to lose material, I might try and either make the position as messy as possible by capturing weird stuff, or trying to capture as much as I can. So pawn takes, and we get our friend the fork, and in this case the bishop fork. It's attacking the king and it's attacking the rook. Now if the knight wasn't on f3, this would actually be a fantastic move because the queen would have to move up to block the check. But the knight is here, so the knight goes back, so we don't end up losing our queen. But when the bishop takes, thinking I've got a rook, a bishop, and a pawn, which is worth 9 points, for a queen which is worth 9 points, black might think that everything's fine, but unfortunately the queen can capture at the end, and suddenly you're down basically a queen against a rook and a pawn in this case, so you're in front by 3 points in this case. So that's the example of forks and skewers. Feel free to go through this video again just to revise. I use Lichess to present these courses when I do coaching and when I put these things together. I'll put a link in the comments for the actual course in Lichess, or you can see it up on the top of the screen. And then hopefully I'll finish this series in the next few weeks, and we'll get a nice run into 2023 where we can go through these courses if you're at school and prepare yourself for inter-school chess in Canberra for 2023. So until next time, my name is Sean Press. I organise these training videos on behalf of the ACT Junior Chess League and look forward to seeing you playing chess in the new year.